Hello, and thanks for joining us today for Tiger Talk TV. I'm Superintendent Jeremy Williams. I'm here today with Amanda Pederson. Amanda, you've had a number of different roles in the district. I'm going to let you introduce yourself and just maybe share what your current role is and what we're talking about today.
Thank you. I'm Amanda Pederson. I am the Assistant Principal at Maytech. Part of my roles also extend to the District Assessment Coordinator this year. I also work with our American Indian Education Program. I help support our area daycare, and of course all of my duties with being the Assistant Principal at Maytech.
Good. So today we're going to talk a bit about the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. We're going to call it AIPAC for abbreviation, a little easier to, rolls off the tongue a little more. So tell us a little bit about what is AIPAC and why is MPS a part of that?
So as a part of being a public school in Minnesota, the Department of Education looks at our American Indian education student count. And if you are a district that has 20 or more students in your district that identify as American Indian education students, you are then qualified to have a AIPAC or Indian Parent Committee. And we in Marshall, we currently have 55 students that in our enrollment that identify as American Indian, and so we have our program that helps assist and plan for that.
Okay. About 55 students you said in the program in Marshall Public Schools. How are students identified for that program?
So at the beginning of the year when our students fill out their enrollment forms, one of the questions they are asked is their ethnicity, so they have to identify if they're Caucasian, African American, and one of the choices is American Indian or Alaskan Native. And if they check that box, they are then identified through the Department of Education as an American Indian education student, which allows for us to get the funding to support them in our schools.
Sure. So they identify as American Indian and then they are automatically part of the AIPAC, or how would you become part of the advisory committee piece?
As for being part of our AIPAC committee, the committee is really based on anyone in our community who is identified as an American Indian or affiliated with any tribes, they are allowed to be a part of our committee. Any student that parents have identified them as American Indian, we do send out letters encouraging them to become a part of our committee. Currently, that's a need that we are trying to increase. We have a couple families that have been very supportive and advocates for the program. We would like to see more. Like I said, we have 55 students now, and we currently have 2 very active members, but we would like to see that increase. Students can be involved as they get into high school. They have more of a voice, but really any community member can come and be a part of it. As far as for voting and decision making, they do have to be affiliated with American Indian, Northern American Indian tribe.
Sure. And it's a relatively new group for Marshall Public Schools, just kind of getting some things going. I think we've been going for 3-4 years. Is probably all we had this group kind of established.
Yep.
And you're new to the role.
Yeah,
so,
this is my second year in the position, and I think we've had it for 3-4, maybe this is our 5th year with it. But it's fairly new and getting established. Like I said, we continue to reach out to our families. We call them, we encourage them with letters. But really, as a school liaison and other community, they can be a part of it too to help any of our Indian education programming needs. So
sure. So let's talk a little bit what that program is and what that looks like. I know you've mentioned, we talked at the school board meeting the other day, some plans and some goals and stuff around that. Can you talk a little bit about what the American Indian education plan is and kind of what kind of goals we'd find in that plan? Yeah,
so as part of being MDE and receiving funding, that funding needs to be tied specifically to some goals that we work with our American Indian education students on. And we have chosen to take a path where we incorporate our world's best workforce and our achievement and integration goals as a district and how we can really align that to support our students. And so the last few years, we've really been focusing around 5 goals. The first one being trying to have our kindergartners ready for school, so the school readiness goal. 3rd grade is a big push in the state to have our 3rd graders reading by 3rd grade, so we have the 3rd grade literacy goal. We have our MCA goals, closing the achievement gap, and we really are working to help our 3rd through 8th and 10th graders, all students, but we focus on those grades because of the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments. And then we focus on the last 2 goals are more geared towards our high school students with with graduation. Are they college and career ready, and then are they graduating? And if you were able to tune into the board meeting, you would have heard Michelle Sterner talking a little bit about the percentages of Native American students going on to colleges is really low. And so those were two really important goals that the committee, when they originally set up those goals, really wanted to keep those in, and they really tie well to our World's Best Workforce and A&I goals. So we have those 5 goals that we focus on. The funding that we get from MDE then goes to those different components of what are we doing to support our students in those. So
sure. So really you're taking some goals that the district's already doing with the World's Best Workforce, and those five areas that MDE has said is so important to monitor, and focusing specifically with this group of students and how they're doing those same 5 areas. So,
yep.
How do you monitor the goals in that? Is that something that the group does, or is that something that you do as the liaison for that, or what does that monitoring look like for that?
Right now, it's I collect kind of all the data and where we're at with everything, and then we sit down as a group and we look at how are those goals coming along. Some of the goals we can look at right away, like our kindergarten readiness. We test those kindergartners right away in the fall. Well, we already know how they looked for this fall. Did the kindergartners coming in who are identified as American Indian education students, are they at grade level for that NWA assessment that we take? So as that data comes in, being the school representative, I'm able to get that data and then share it back with the group. And that's where we make some of those bigger decisions on. Right now we do offer our families, it's not required, but we offer a tutor. Mm-hmm. And so if a student is really struggling and they're not at that readiness level, that is an option that a family can choose, is they can say, hey, we want to have our child stay after school and work with a tutor. Same, that goes for all of our students in grades K through 12, but we can look at it more closely with some of those students who might not be proficient on the MCAs or not reading at grade level by 3rd grade.
So it's not a separate test or a separate monitoring system or something. We're using assessments we already use with all students and just measuring specifically for American Indian students through the American Indian Education Plan,
yep.
and the funding that comes out in state. It makes
yep.
sense. So thinking about that piece, there's some funding tied to it. What does that look like, and how do we use those funds that the district gets for the American Indian Education Plan?
So as pretty much everything with MDE, they have different formulas to figure out their funding. And with having our number of students, 55 students, there's a formula that they use. And this past year we've received, or our estimate in aid was about $21,000. And so with that, that's the formula that they use helps us pay then for our tutors. Or we also have family engagement nights to bring families in, and that helps fund some of those resources, as well as we've been trying really hard to get a language app available for our families. So the aid that we get really focuses on how we can better help specifically to our students in American Indian education.
Sure.
That's a tongue twister.
And when you're writing those goals and looking at how you're going to use those funds, the American Indian, the Parent Advisory Committee, that's really the group that's developing some of that piece. So how does that work?
So as part of the school liaison or rep, I kind of share our district World's Best Workforce goals, and then we kind of talk about what we can do with our program specifically to our students. And then yes, the Parent Advisory Committee is really the ones that have to put the stamp of approval on this is what we want. So this last 2 years they had a big push for the tutor. They really want to keep that tutor in place to help those kids with after school, if it's with math or with reading or any of the subject areas, really just to help support their children. And then they also have a really big push for our cultural competencies. They really want to make sure that our staff know and understand the culture and maybe some of the history or even the historical trauma that some of the families might bring to school, just so we can better reach our kids. And Michelle says it best, if you ever get a chance to talk to her, when she says, when we have an opportunity to see it kind of through their lens and understand, and then they come to our classrooms and we can talk to them about specifics to their culture, or when we buy books from the media center and they can find a book that really connects to what, oh, I learned this at home, or this is part of my heritage or my culture. It really kind of brings those students to step up at another level and feel very proud.
Sure. So what I hear you saying is we we identify which kids would qualify, or which kids would be identify as American Indian students. There's some funding that comes from the state, and then this group, this advisory committee gets together and they say, okay, we've got this much money, here are the kids we have. You kind of look at what those kids' needs are and where they performed historically well and where they've historically maybe struggled, and you find some supports to help them just be successful in those identified goal areas.
We reach out to all of our families too with, like, for example, our tutor system. We reach out to all of our families and we offer it to all of them, even if they might not feel that, or if the student maybe did meet on the kindergarten readiness assessment, but they feel like that extra support would really help us as a family. We want to make sure we offer that to all of them. But we do identify specifically, and we make, if I have to as the school liaison, I'll make contacts with those families to say, hey, we have this support available for your child. Are you interested?
Sure. It's like a great program. Nice to have the parent support and that collaboration to make that happen.
Yeah.
Good. So let's talk a little bit. Excuse me. You mentioned the cultural competencies a little bit. What is cultural competencies?
So cultural competencies is a part of what, as far as Minnesota Department of Education, teachers and people working in education, we have to meet requirements every year or every 5 years to keep our teaching license. And so they have different components that we have to meet, from positive behaviors to mental health. And then a component of that is our cultural competencies. They really want our teachers, our educators out there to have an understanding of all of the different cultures and heritages that are coming into our buildings, the diversity, and how we can better reach and teach those students. And so our cultural competencies for MPS, we really look at our diverse population here and how can we connect with those students. And then specific to American Indian education, we have some of our families have given presentations to our staff to help them know and understand more about the American Indian cultures. We have a number of tribes that are even just in our region. And then just there's little differences between all of them as well. And so the more we know about that, the better we can address things when they come up in our classrooms. There are standards that are tied to our American Indian tribes in Minnesota. And so to meet those standards as well, it's just another way to really have the teachers know and understand where these families are coming from. We have another family or another parent did a capstone project, and they shared that with us. And it gives the teachers an insight to what boarding schools were like for some of our families back when they were forced to go into boarding schools. Just to give you a different view of maybe how we were raised compared to how they were raised for education. And it makes you really realize that they might have a harder time coming to our schools because they had such a different experience. And while it might not be the same for their child today, that's what they remember and hold on to. And so it's really good information for us to just look at it in a different light.
So when we're talking those cultural competencies, this is really kind of another tier of this project or this program. It's one part is looking at the students' needs and how we're going to meet those needs and identifying some assessments and some measures and some benchmarks maybe in that regard. Then this is taking a look at, for the teachers, just understanding here are the kids in your classroom and here are some of the needs and some of the things that you need to know about how to meet their needs. So really understanding that culture a bit better. So good. So how does your advisory committee play a role in helping meet those cultural competencies? Like what specific things might they do? You mentioned a paper and some things, but what does that look like?
We've had, like I said, we've had a few of them come to different staff developments and present there. We've also had they have recorded videos. We've reached out to, we had the capstone paper where teachers can read. And there are a bunch of other avenues through just even the state of Minnesota that we can connect to our cultural competencies. But we really, as a group, when they sit down and meet and we talk about what we need, that's a big thing that they don't ever want to get rid of. They really feel it's very strong and very important that they keep having an opportunity to teach specifically about our American Indian education students. And so our communications there, a lot of times it comes from presentations they might have or have seen or have done, something they may have read about or written. Books, any books that might relate so we can have a better understanding of maybe some of the cultural upbringing for some of our students. So it's constantly a work in progress, and we're always trying to find ways to add to that just to really help our like you said, help our teachers understand and kind of train them before they get to the classroom with the students.
Sure. So it wouldn't be like a once and done kind of thing. It's something that we'll continue to do to make sure that, as new staff, or just making sure keep it fresh in people's minds, and something that happens in a lot of different ways. But this is just specific for this group. So great. That sounds like a good program. So let's talk a little bit about families. So we talked about the students and we talked about the teachers piece, but how do we engage the families in this work and help them to maybe connect to both what the advisory committee is doing, but also to connect to what's going on with the school and some of that piece? What does that look like?
So right now we do have a lot of communications that we send out in forms of letters and like our Blackboard Connect, where it's an electronic letter to the families. I know our committee has even spent time calling families, trying to get them involved and connected. It's still a fairly new program, so we're really trying to work to bring in more of that family involvement piece. But we also work every spring to try to come up with an event to invite our families to. In 2019, they had an event, and this was the year before I took over as the liaison, that they kind of got together. They learned about husk dolls and how families used to make husk dolls. They had an author come in. The Grasshopper Girl was kind of the theme, or the book theme for that year. Last year we had some event ideas planned, and then of course our pandemic took over and it changed things. So we decided last year to make like a spotlight newsletter to just showcase the different things that students in our building are doing, families are doing, community members are doing. And so with the support of the parents that were in the committee last year, they reached out to families, and they were able to get different videos. We had some people that made videos of reading a book, and then one of the books was a fry bread, how to make fry bread. Mm-hmm. And then they actually created a video of them making fry bread so families could make fry bread. We had students submit artwork that related back to maybe it was something with their tribal culture, or just the American Indian education culture in particular. Mm-hmm. And so we really tried to showcase that anything anybody wanted to send, we really wanted to get it out there so people could see. This spring, we're trying to get a family event going for our families. Again, COVID is making it a little difficult, but we're really hoping to make some family kits so families can request these different kits that, and we just kind of have a few out there that we're toying with how we want to do them, but a fry bread kit, so they would get a book, they would get a recipe, and then we would give them the supplies to make fry bread, and can really spend time together as a family doing something and learning about this. And so trying to come up with some of these ideas that we can still say we're a part of American Indian education, and even though we can't all come together to celebrate, we still want to have an opportunity to celebrate even if it's at home.
One of those victims of the pandemic this year, how to make that happen, but it sounds like some creative ways to continue that. And last year it just didn't happen because the pandemic was fresh and we didn't get to have that event. So great. So if there's a family that's really interested in becoming part of maybe those family events or learning more about that, what would they do?
They can contact me at the schools. You can go to our district website and search for Amanda Pederson, and you can call the schools. You can call any one of the schools, and the admin assistants would be able to transfer you to me. And really, that's kind of the connecting point as far as through the school. Otherwise, this year, Michelle Knife-Sterner is our president or chair of our committee, and she would be another one that if you know who she is, you could always reach out to her. And then we have a couple other committee members that could also be, if you know of them, you could reach out to anyone in the American Indian community, and they would be able to get you in contact with us.
Great. So not a big committee yet, but getting some more people on there can help with some of that too. So with those engagement events, we mentioned if they wanted to kind of attend or learn more about that, what if there's a family or there's somebody out there listening today that just says, I have something I'd like to contribute to that. I'd like to maybe participate in doing a presentation or something like that. Would that be the same kind of way, or is there something different they would do there?
Yeah, they could reach out to me or Michelle, and we would definitely find a way to. We really want to showcase our students and our families and our community, and so reach out to me or to Michelle, and we would find a way to make that happen. If it's creating a video, if it's sharing artwork, we want to make sure we're getting that out there as well.
Great. Let's go back and talk about a couple other things that you mentioned earlier. You mentioned some tutors that are available for students. Is that for all students across the district at certain grade levels, or what does that look like?
So with our funding, the American Indian Education Tutors are strictly for our students who are identified as American Indian Education students, but it is open to students in grades K through 12. So any family, if they're feeling they need some support, they can send an email to their classroom teacher. The classroom teacher would know, like, okay, this is a Amanda Pederson thing, or they would go to the district or to their administrator, and their administrator would say that's an Amanda Pederson thing. And we would work to get that set up. We try to be as flexible as possible to help our families. A lot of times it does fall after school, but we've also had, there was one year that we were able to make a few things work to have during the school day. The tutor was able to stop in and maybe support the student during like an advisory time or a downtime. Obviously, we don't want to pull kids out of classes for this. It's about supporting that classwork. So we can definitely get creative with the schedule if need be, but we really encourage families, if it's something that you need, reach out to us, and we want to give you that support.
Great. And that tutor, it's not about the cultural piece necessarily. The tutor, the idea is to help the students in this program to be successful and meet those goals we talked about earlier on when we were talking about that. So
we've gone back and forth as a committee on that too. It is really about supporting with those academic needs. We really want our students to have the academic support to be successful, and then hopefully to change that. Like I said earlier, the graduation, the graduation rate is usually lower in 4 years. A lot of times we see it go up by the 5th or 6th year, and then moving on to that college level, if it's a 2-year or a 4-year. We want to see that percentage increase for our American Indian students. And so it's about giving those academic supports. The committee has talked a lot about how do we get, so it's the best of both worlds. How do we get a tutor in that position that has that cultural background and has the academic expertise to help the students. A lot of times it's our own teachers in the classrooms who are taking roles after school or throughout the day to support those students, which is a great way to support them as well. But if we could get the best of both worlds, we would love to see a community member that could fit that role too, that could support both the cultural side of American Indian education and the academics.
Mm-hmm. And for the high school kids, we just touched on that a little bit ago, but with the high school kids, you talked about the college and career ready and the graduation pieces. What are some specific things that we do to help those students be successful through this program?
Specific to the funding that we have with American Indian Education, we have funds set aside to support one of our counselors who really works more closely with our American Indian Education students about completing FAFSAs, sitting down and helping them connect if they're going to go to SMSU, for example, who out here could we connect with in the Office of Diversity that would have that connection to the American Indian ethnicity piece, or any college for that matter. We support them if they're going to do a college visit, we'll reimburse them for mileage just to really encourage. Sometimes they don't want to go visit a school because, that's so far away and it costs so much to go. Again, this year has been a little interesting. College visits have been more of the virtual, but those are a couple ways that we support for the college piece. And then all of our students in Marshall Public Schools in the high school 9-12 do participate in our Ramp Up program where they are learning about college and career readiness skills. And so that's a piece of one of our goals is the college career readiness, and then we survey those students and how they feel about being ready for college or a career right after high school. And so with the support of the one counselor really focusing in on those students and then helping them if they want to know more about a college. Minnesota Department of Education does a great job on their website and sending stuff to me as a school rep about scholarships that are available, opportunities for visits, or if there are leadership opportunities for our American Indian youth, that they can go to those things. And so we try to get those out to the right students at the right grade levels as well.
Good, so some time to focus on those pieces too. So the last question for you, Amanda, that I had some interest in, you mentioned a little bit ago, was this language app. So certainly there's more than one language. We have a number of different tribes represented through our American Indian population and with our students in Marshall. What is this language app? Tell me more about that. What does that look like and how does that work? Or does it exist yet? Or is it something we're just exploring?
It's still something we're working on. There are a couple different language apps out there, and this is another thing that our families have really brought forward, and they really want us to continue to try to work and find something. There are language apps out there that help students learn the specific dialects of their tribes. So whether it's Ojibwe or if it's Lakota, Dakota, it teaches the students their native language. And so there are a bunch of different apps out there that we've looked at. We've had a few families try a few of them, and it's still trying to work out some of the logistics. There are some very powerful ones out there that can really enhance students' learning. That they also, with that comes the price. And so trying to balance the apps that we are seeing are benefiting our families, and then making sure that it's something that also isn't going to take all the funds, so we can't have other things like the tutors and some of those other things. But our families do feel strongly, who are currently a part of our committee, that continuing to try to look for something that fits that bill to really help our families learn their native language, basically.
Sure. So it really fits back to that culture piece and helping to maybe continue some of those traditions or help students connect to some pieces that maybe they don't know about their culture.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
Great. Amanda, anything I didn't ask you about that you think we should tell our audience about today about the American Indian group?
I don't think we covered quite a bit today. I'm really glad that we were able to talk a little bit more about the cultural competency piece, because I think that's important, that we know that as a staff and as administrators, we're really pushing so our staff know, and not just American Indian education, but all of our cultures that are part of our diversity in Marshall. We want to really make sure our staff and educators are aware and familiar with that. And so I'm glad we were able to bring that into the conversation today. But otherwise, everything else was really, I think, beneficial for people to know.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us, and thank you everyone for watching Tiger Talk this month.